Hi, my name is George and welcome to my review. Today we are talking about the Spyderco Pacific Salt Yellow FRN. Like all my reviews, here's the page which will conclude all the specifications. If you need to, you can freeze this page, but to save time, I will move on to the next page, which covers the positive and the negative points of the knife. In my opinion, this knife here is very comparable to the Spyderco Enduro series. As you can see, in terms of the size and design, they are like brothers. Which means in this review, I will use the Enduro as a reference to review this knife. Now, for a start, I really like this large and comfortable handle. In my opinion, the large handle allows you to cut with a very steady grip, and this knife exactly does that. It has the volcanic texture. As you can see here, it's an illustrative drawing. What it means is, as you can see, that there's small grits along the entire handle of the knife, and each one of these small grits, it's in a similar shape to a volcano, like the name suggests. And there's a small sharp corner on each one of the four corners, and there's a cavity in the center. So when you hold the knife, it actually gives some degree of jimping. In my opinion, it's not too grippy, unlike this Enduro, which has a lot more aggressive jimping on the handle. So I think it's a moderate jimping, but it's effective. Now, I think this knife has also both EDC purpose and defensive purpose. As you can see that if you hold it in a reverse position, it's reasonably very logical, and this knife slides very well, so I think it can do a lot of damage. It's got a very large blade. It's almost as long as 4 inches long, so it's designed for heavy duty cutting. So it's considerably a very big EDC in my opinion. Also, this knife is very weight efficient. As you can see that there is no liners designed in this knife. Plastic on both sides all the way. So that reduces a lot of weight from this knife. It only weighs 3 ounces, which comparing with the Enduro, it's about 0.4 ounces less. Also, comparing with the Benchmade Osborne, which is just slightly, weighs slightly less than this knife, but Osborne has much shorter blade. So I think this knife gives you so much cutting ability, with the also providing you very little weight. The strong lockback design, also something I like. I don't need to talk too much about it. You already know what it is. There's also very effective jimping on the back of the blade. I can show you there's a difference between this jimping and the Enduro jimping. The Pacific Salt here has a very common Spyderco jimping. You find it on a whole lot of other Spyderco models, whereas the Enduro has a different kind of jimping. I have drawn an illustrative drawing here. See how the Pacific Salt has a much more dense jimping and much more aggressive than the Enduro, which is also effective but less aggression. It doesn't dig into your thumb as much, but you know it does function. So that's one interesting thing I noticed about this knife. Next thing is there's a very strong blade tip design. it's quite rounded, so I think it's probably designed for a hunting knife or a rescue knife purpose. Comparing with the Endura, which is pointier, this knife here has a very thick blade, and that thickness maintains the same all the way across the almost the entire length of the blade, whereas the Endura is kind of a straight line from this point and narrows down to the tip of the blade in a very straight line manner. So it's a stronger blade, in other words. It's a stronger tip, in other words, excuse me. This knife also has the hollow grind, which I believe cuts better than the normal flat grind. To do a very brief cutting test, as you can see, cuts paper like crazy. So I think that makes this knife a very lethal weapon if you ever have to use it in a defensive situation. The big thumb hole here is also something that a lot of people would dig, because for normal use, I think the Spyderco Endura's thumb hole size is just enough. As you can see, there's a slight difference between the thumb hole here and the one there, because that one's slightly bigger. And the bigger thumb hole is designed for people who wear gloves. To give you an example of a bad design, here I have an Easy Out made by Gerber, which the thumb hole is very narrow. So what happens is, comparing with a good design, which your thumb digging very deeply into that hole makes it very secure and firm when you try to open it. This knife actually cut me once while I was trying to open it. That's why I have attached this cable tie to assist opening this knife. So as you can see, my thumb can hardly dig into this hole at all. So that's just an example of a bad design. Now the H1 steel, the Spyderco website actually stated that it will never rust. I've seen some YouTube videos on it, and it's quite impressive. It looks like the steel can survive a whole lot of harsh environment without any rust. So that's another positive point. Another couple of things I need to mention based on my speculation is I think this knife will slice really well as chopping, because of the fact there is a lot more weight on the blade than the handle. I think it will do you a bit of help when you slice the knife, slice things with this knife. Also, it's a bit of a rescue and hunting knife in my opinion, judging by the design on the tip. It's a very bright colored handle. I think if you ever drop it in the wood or the mud, this color will be much more identifiable than, say, black color or green. Now, there are a couple of negative things I could say about the knife. For number one is, should you ever have to use this knife to pry, which is something I personally don't support. I think a knife's designed to cut, and you should always intend to use it that way. But if you ever have to use this knife to pry, it's not gonna last because of the fact that there is no steel liner. So that's just something you could think of as a negative point. Now another thing is, as you can see here, there's no screws on the knife, so basically you can't take it apart. Should you ever have to clean the knife, this knife is just not going to be open, so keep that in mind. Again, I think the handle texture is good enough But if you really pedantic about it, I think the Endura 4 has a better jimping, so that's something you could consider if you really dig that. Also, the pocket clip options on this knife is kind of limited. As you can see, there's only one way you can two ways you can carry it. So I could make a few negative points on the based on my speculation. For one thing, I think the H1 steel is kind of potentially softer than the S90v or the VG10. For that matter, there is no carbon in the alloy, so that's one thing. One reason I would think so. Another reason is when I got this particular knife, it probably doesn't happen to all of the Pacific salts, but when I got this knife, I had encountered a little bit of situation here. When I touch the tip here, I can feel something kind of try to grab on my finger. That's actually due to the fact there's a little bit of bend or a dent on the edge. This is cross-sectional view of the tip here. So I think maybe because the steel is a little bit softer than your average S30V, for example, I think for a very hard steel, that usually will just that wouldn't quite happen. There's a slight dent, so that's just one thing I need to mention. Another thing is I would not recommend this knife as a diving knife. Just based on some common sense I kind of experienced. This is the illustration of the knife's locking mechanism. As you know, as you can see, here's the blade. There's the locking bar, and in a normal situation, once the locking bar grabs on the locking surface of this blade, that's when the knife is secure. I can push that as hard as I want. It's not going to close the knife. So now, I think in the situation where you take the knife to go diving, there is a very unlikely chance of accumulated sand in this locking mechanism, which could potentially make the locking mechanism basically ineffective. So I think in that case, it won't lock the knife, and if you are not careful enough, you could cut yourself. So that's just another thing I feel like could happen, but once again, I think it's unlikely. But otherwise, overall, this is a very excellent knife as an EDC. It gives so much cutting ability. It cuts very, very well, like you can expect it from many Spydercos. So I think if you are starting to get to know Spyderco, this is a really good knife to own. It also doesn't cost you that much either, so I would recommend it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.